So where I last left off was the issue of what's written in the book of Joshua and other parts of the Bible about the conquest of Canaan, as opposed to what historical reconstructions put together. And again, I think that this situation will be more and more clarified over time, possibly. I mean, the one thing I just want to say, historians, especially in the 20th century, have really deconstructed a lot of nationalist identities, where we see in many, many cases people invent their pasts for various reasons, and link themselves with historic events that we just come to understand to be utterly made up. And historians are not welcome at a lot of nationalist parties, okay? Unless they're the official nationalist historians. But again, I also want to say that I think that anything is possible in terms of this. So let me just give a few more examples of why. Canaanite culture, you have the word El, which was a Canaanite god. And El is a word given to God in the Bible. There's several. It's a singular form there. I mean, many of you, if you know in English, let's say Bethel, there's a lot of times used that, a house of God, Beit El, house of El, and so on. But there's also the pottery and other things there that simply put the ancient Israelites in with Canaanite culture. And I don't have all of the exact details for you on this, but I can definitely tell you that this is the modern consensus. And it's a consensus even among religious Jewish and religious Christian archaeologists, but yet ones that don't necessarily take the Bible as always literal history, but as allegories or stories which have some sort of spiritual truth, which is a whole other dimension or different way of thinking, which I'm not going to advocate or talk down on. I'm just putting that in there. Okay, so here's some other interesting aspects, because if you look in the prophets of the Bible, they're always condemning the people in the area, the ancient Israelites, for mixing with other religions. And we definitely see in the archaeological evidence there that, in fact, ancient Israelites did not just only worship the God of the Bible in the way that the prophets would have liked to have seen them to do that. So, just for example, there's over 6,000 times in what Christians call the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Aramaic scriptures, the Tanakh for Jews. God is given 4 consonants in the Hebrew language, and they're the YHWH consonants, and you read them from right to left. I have some of the ancient Phoenician style writings that were earlier, and then the Aramaic script that came later there. Jews thought that God's name was so holy that it shouldn't be pronounced. And so they had vowel marks to indicate to say God or Lord afterwards. But his name, Yahweh, permeates even in the names. I mean, Elijah, Eliyahu in Hebrew, means my God is Jah, or Yahweh. In the English form is Jehovah, okay, which is what the King James Version put forward. Now, in the Bible, God should not be depicted. He is without representation, and definitely he is sustained in of himself. But we find in the archaeological record of him having a consort, it appears, Asherah, in this picture here. Okay, and this is around the 8th century BCE, and it's him basically with a lady friend. So he's being depicted with a woman. Now, this is not the religion of the Bible this is Canaanite religion, but it's also using a very distinct name of a god of the Bible. And so here again, this is where we see things that look very much Canaanite-like, uh, you know, in what we're seeing. Okay. All right. So just to move away from that, I want to talk about also something that's debated by historians, but I'm going to take the position of the view that King David and Solomon did exist, and that the United Kingdom of Israel did exist. But I want to just clarify that the archaeological data is not so straightforward. There are good reasons, the story goes, for people to question the existence of this very famous king and question if the actual kingdom of Israel was ever set up the way that the biblical story tells it to be set up. My research on this has found that it's a little bit more, there's a lot more different, a wide variety of debates on this. Okay, I'm going to take this from the kind of the biblical story, but giving you that clarification that things are not totally clarified, if that makes sense. All right, so essentially, this is what it would look like. This is the biblical depiction of the land. And Saul was considered the first king of Israel. So in the Bible, he gets anointed, and then he falls out of favor with God. David is put on the throne, and then there becomes what's called the Davidic kingship. King Solomon follows after, and having a kingship through the line of the king of David is going to be considered important. Jesus is going to claim to come through that line, and so that's just something to say. But if you look here, I just want to give you the visualization of what land we're talking about. So in the biblical story, Judah takes over the north, uniting all the Israelite tribes. Jerusalem becomes the capital, which is quite contentious in the modern Israel-Palestine conflict now. And as a quick side note, I meant to say this at the beginning, please do not, I'm hoping that as you look at the ancient history of Israel, you will see that what goes on in the modern Israel-Palestine conflict is a little bit more complicated than what you're learning here through the biblical or the archaeological record, because it becomes a much more complicated debate about who gets land. And keep in mind that many of the founders of the state of Israel were not even religious. They simply used the Bible as what they thought to be kind of a nationalist story. So I just want to break away for a second to say that whatever your opinion would be on the Israel-Palestine conflict, you don't want to get bogged down with this ancient history to try to clarify what's going on in the modern times, because the conflict now is really rooted in the 19th century onward, not all the way back here. And feel free to email me or call me if you want a clarification on that. I cover that in my 107 class. Okay, so anyways, moving on. Tradition, there's a tradition that the King David wrote much of the Psalms and the Bible. So King David is a very important person in the Bible. And in fact, many Jews and Christians are named David. And even Arabs, Daoud is David in Arabic. So his legend is very important. And perhaps his historical legacy as well. King Solomon, his son after him, builds a temple to Yahweh. This is important in the 10th century BCE. And he has this tradition and legend of being a very, very wise person. The writings in the Bible of Ecclesiastes and Proverbs and the Song of Solomon are attributed to him. Historians really don't believe many of these. They believe many of these writings come later, especially Ecclesiastes, but these are traditionally attached to him. And in fact, Song of Songs, Shir Shirim, Song of Songs is often called Song of Solomon, okay, in the Bible. It's a very beautiful and erotic love poem. And it's maybe really shocking if you don't think of the Bible having erotic love poems, especially chapter 7 of Song of Songs. Read it, you'll be surprised. In any case, you have this legendary kingdom, and then it all falls apart. I'm going to go back and return to this topic in the next lecture.